Welcome to the first video blog of what we've termed Justice and Democracy in Sunderland. It's not political, it's not about having a go at any one particular group. What it's about is bringing everybody together who's got an issue, whether that be an issue with the local authority, with other bodies, who has found that they haven't got justice, they haven't been able to progress what is the thing that concerns them most within the city. And I think we'd all agree over the last few years there's been some sort of major developments coming forward that we've all got concerns for. The format is, I'll keep the video down to about 10-15 minutes and post new videos every 2 to 3 days or earlier if required. And I'll put links and notices on my Twitter feed, which is at woodenbox42, which is AWOODEN, numerical 42 on Twitter. People like Len Lowther and other sites will pick up these links, Save Seaburn, etc. And they will post them around the city, hoping that if you're interested, have a look at them. Excuse me. Think about what the issues are. Are they relevant to you? If they're not, fine. Don't come back on YouTube. Don't have a look at them. It's not for you. But clearly what I've picked up over the last few months is there's a place for some people that are clearly not happy with how the city's running, how the city's developing, and how the city's progressing from when we first became a city, I think in 1992. From 92, when we became a city, our first big developments was about 2000, 2001, around the millennium. And Winter Gardens, you saw Debenhams phase 2 of the bridges. And then mid-2000s, we saw the Sunnyside develop out, £100 million spent on bringing that up to the state of the art that it is now. But apart from the Aquatic Centre, Software City, okay, we've got all of the developments on the outside of the city, but clearly now one of the things that bothers us all is the state of our city centre. And you've got to ask yourself, from the early mid-2000s to now, nearly 10-15 years on, why haven't we developed the way Newcastle, Hull, Leeds, Manchester, why haven't we developed like those cities that we know people want to invest, and we know that we can actually spend the money in the right areas and develop out the land that we've got. Yes, there's the Vaux issue. Not all the council's fault if you actually know the true history of it, because Vaux themselves gave the land away to Tesco's, who then I was a council officer at the time, we took the judicial review, we stopped them building, swapped some land, and then finally we got the Vaux site, and through the Homes and Communities Agency started building, which is now what we've got through our arm's length company Siglium. And I do know that quite a few people in the city aren't happy how Siglium are operating. There are issues around that, some quite understandable and some quite not so understandable. Things that were in their control and things like Carillion going bust, which just were out of everybody's control. But that's not to get into debate about those things, but it's just to give it a bit of a history. What I'll now do is I'll go through the sort of timeline of what I am, because this isn't about me, it's about us. It's about us as a city, us as residents, citizens, the culture people, the young people, the old people, the group, community groups. It's about your next door neighbours. It's just literally about we all pay council tax, we all live here, we all live in houses. Those that are fortunate to have houses, some have more than, well, we have heard that some have 3 houses in their family and live in another one. But hey ho, some people are luckier than others. But unfortunately, as we know, since 2010, we've got a growing population who don't have a house. So where do those people go? Where do the people go who want to move out of their parents' house and buy, rent, but at levels that aren't going to cripple their wages? Because apart from the big sort of companies like Nissan, etc., where are the big wages in Sunderland? And you've got to ask yourself, is that part of the problem? Because when you look at our council tax band, 82% of all of our houses are classed as Band A and Band B, which are the two cheapest bands. So therefore, the council haven't got as much money to spend as, say, Newcastle, where only 40% of theirs is in A and B. They've got higher end houses. So you can see where some of the historic problems sort of lie within the city. But I'll come back to more about that in a moment, and basically the journey that sort of happened as to why we are now. But just to sort of tell you a little bit about myself. Resident of Sunderland since 1994, but County Durham lad just down the road. Only male in my family sort of not to have gone down the pit, sort of other than one who went in the RAF on my dad's side. The rest of my family, shipyards, etc., different sort of backgrounds. So you can see where sort of my values came from. Came from typical working class stock, but that doesn't mean I'm rooted in the left-wing socialist or have moved on to sort of Tory. I don't actually have a political party that represents me, or represents the sort of friends that I associate with, because what we look at is more a value base of how do you treat others, how do you approach others, how do you sort of want to get on without damaging others. Because that's not an easy thing for some people. Some people just want to make money, but unfortunately it then exploits others. That's the sort of thing that's not me. Typical comprehensive education, played a lot of sport as well. Sport was a big thing in my life. Went to school, didn't come out with a great deal, but then went to college at Peatley and got into sport in a big way. Then I did a sports course, went to what was Leeds Poly, but now the Metropolitan University of Leeds. Met a lot of good friends there and different people, met a lot of different cultures, which I think was important. From there, I got into sort of volunteering and youth work and sailed in the 93 Tall Ships Race, so I value what's happening this year in the 2018 Tall Ships Race, because they're also bringing back the ship that I sailed on, the Black Diamond. So I'm quite excited about that, because that's sort of part of my history 25 years ago, which is quite scary. In terms of then, university, came back, worked with people. I then went back to university to do a degree, community and youth work degree, where this is where I sort of really found my home, about working with people. I had people skills, but working with young people, older people. So I did youth work, got qualified, did youth work, went to South Tyneside, and then got into homelessness with a guy from Sunderland called Peter Young, who at the same time was a councillor in Sunderland. And at the time, 1999, when we hooked up together, he also became chair of Fire Authority. And I watched people like him in action, how they actually, as councillors, decent people who lived here, he was a Washington councillor at the time, lived here, and how they did things properly. Because I think the old guard, in the main, were very good. Yes, there was issues over the years. We've all heard the stories of Public Works Department, people getting things tarmacked and stuff, but it's not on the sort of angry scale that it is now, which I think sort of needs to be taken into account. So worked with Peter. Then I went to Howdenburn YMCA, where I did 2 years of homelessness work there, set up a project, chaired quite a lot of the major sort of homelessness forums in the city, voluntary sectors, brought people together, worked with the local authorities. And then I got offered a job in the local authority working on what was Labour's sort of fourth emergency service at the time, called the Smoke Bill Programme. And basically what it was, it ended up being a £12 million programme. Within a couple of years, my boss left and went to housing strategy. Gen 2 had already left housing, and all that was left for the local authority to do was the strategic role, and we were part of that function about deciding what went where, how the jigsaw fitted, and then asking people to do it. Effectively, that's what, if you hear the word commissioning, that's what local authority speak is about. You decide what to do based on what you need, you talk to the people, you get consent for it, and then you go and do it. And you find different partners, and you get into procurement and things. You know, the sort of contracts where people have alleged brown envelopes and the rest of it. In reality, in housing, that didn't go that didn't go on in the way that sort of we've heard around sort of we've all heard the stories of planners and land and the things that have emerged recently, but I'll touch on those in more detail in either later on this blog or in another blog. And my boss left and I suddenly became the manager for the city. Now, if you think of the council structure, you had chief exec, a director, head of service, and then my level of management. Good wages, don't get us wrong, but at the same time what I tended to think was I get paid that level of money to take responsibility. So I was the budget holder for £12 million. By the time I left, I had 22,000 vulnerable people of non-statutory, so they weren't in social care adult services, but they were in sort of sheltered accommodation, the high-rise tower blocks. Because not a lot of you will know that they were supported and they had workers going in, making sure they were okay and linking up their care packages. Young homelessness, young teenage parents, domestic violence. We actually commissioned the brand new project sort of in the coalfields. What else did we sort of bring in that wasn't there at the time? Drug and alcohol, we brought Necker in, but we were creative about it and we actually got good value. We ended up going from £12 million down to about 9 and still up in the programme. Between that period of 2004 and 2011, when I eventually had to leave, as part of the process of what I'll discuss later, we reduced homelessness down to a ridiculous level in the city, and young people had started to get, and we just got to a point where we were going to commission something else, like revitalise sort of how people access services. And so you would have had young people, single people with complex needs, to take in mental health, drugs, alcohol, because that was just bonkers the way it was all commissioned and money was used and doubly spent and things like that. We also had families, because I don't know if you know, but the local authority has a statutory duty to house all homeless families, irrespective of need or whatever. And we have one project at Ashkirk, and we used others. We tried to avoid B&Bs, but it wasn't always perfect. And shipping kids all over the northeast, which some of my colleagues did, I found a bit bizarre, to be honest. Not when you could have actually asked the local B&B, can we actually pay you to take all of our families? But that's another story. And we just got to that point where it was all about to be take off in 2011, when effectively what happened was they suspended me for their own reasons, and took 2 years before I actually left. But that story starts in 2007, when I've got girls, one of whom is disabled, she's the oldest, and let's just say something happened in a local school in 2007 to 4 disabled kids, which, to be honest, shouldn't happen. It just shouldn't happen, and people should have been investigated and things. But the wisdom of the education department at the local authority at the time decided, one, to back the school and cover everything up, which, hey, that was their prerogative. But remember, I was a senior employee, went alongside these people, so that was quite a tough ask. But at the same time, I challenged them appropriately, sometimes a little bit too noisily for their liking, and because I'm quite straightforward, quite blunt sometimes if I'm sort of right and the facts are there. From there, what also happened was I would start to cross my new head of service and question his judgment and his values, because they weren't just what we'd expected, and also some of his practices. As it turned out, by 2011-12, we actually found out that he'd lied to Cabinet. He'd signed off a contract worth, I think, at the time about £3 million, but it's climbed up then to a local charity who shall remain nameless, because I won't name anybody actually on these blogs. And that's what started to motivate me, because one, it was personal about my children. Because to get at me, they also got at my children, but I won't go into the detail of what they did. But let's just say, sitting beside people who say they care about people who are doing what they did to my family, just said to me, these officers are actually corrupt, morally corrupt. Not just about finances, but actually the scruples of an alley cat is the best way I can describe some of them. But also at the same time, weirdly, not weirdly, but in the local authority, there are lots of good people who are trying to do the right thing, right from the top down to the bottom. But it's not always the easiest environment to do the right thing in when other people have other agendas. And the other bizarre thing from 2007 is, It wasn't politically led because we'd had the previous chief exec from Rotherham, who effectively fled Rotherham in 2004 when their horror story of what their children and their sort of abuse all happened down there, of which we've seen on national TV and stuff. But then he brought his deputy up from the same place, so I think he bailed him out as well, who then became chief exec, just at the time when we had a change in political leadership. And obviously the leader at the time, I will name him, was Paul Watson, who I knew of Paul beforehand, and yes, if I'll be honest, we all know his backstory. And I'm not going to go into that tonight, but what I will say politically, I had no evidence that anything else that Paul did in his political life, from when I knew him when he came in after that incident in sort of 1999, because I think the incident was in the early 90s. Excuse me. He appeared to be doing the right things. He said the right things, but he also did the right things. He shaped things. But then two things happened. The new chief exec came in, and let's just say he was a PR dream. And he also brought a lot of people around him, the new Director of Education at the time, who, I don't know if you remember, after the Victoria Kalimba case where the young black girl died and they took children's services out of adults and put it in with children's education. And that was where my daughter got caught up, because safeguarding should have actually investigated, but they got stopped by the Director of Education at the time and her heads of service because they wanted to protect the education side, because that's what they knew. Social work wasn't their bag. And in reality, that decision around merging was where Sunderland went on a journey around children from 2008, 2007, 8, all the way to 2015 when it failed Ofsted. What I can categorically say, knowing I work with friends and also my daughter's experiences, is from 2015, the new trust that Paul Watson floated off is actually working. It might not appear to, and you hear the stories, £6 million spent on social workers, etc., agency workers. Well, that's the reality of local government at the moment, because there isn't enough trained social workers out there. So if you know and you worked alongside these people, but in the main, these people do care. However, there are minor problems that they get to grips with. We also had a political change in Louise Farthing coming in as the portfolio holder with a deputy who I knew quite well at the time. Let's just say that they pulled everything together and they've worked with the current management, and thankfully Louise is back as the portfolio holder. And I'm confident that over the next couple of years we'll see a big difference in Sunderland with this Children's Together. The new chief exec starts, because I don't think the one at the first appointment really got to grips, but his directors did. So Suzanne Carty, Simon Marshall, and I can't remember the third one, but I've met them, I've either exchanged emails or met them personally, and I have confidence in them. And my friends know me, if I haven't got confidence in you, I'll tell you. But if I do have confidence in you, I'll give you a chance. And my view is the dealings with my daughter from the previous old education to now, and what I'm hearing from friends and friends, ex-heads who are now working there, it's getting better. And I think we've just got to give it a bit of time. It's still new, understanding the relationship with the local authority, because it's a separate company, although you do have governance through the political links, etc. In terms of adult services, that was where my second part of my horror story started a little bit, because I stood up to a particular head of service of adult services who had grown up during the John Marsden years and thought he was John Marsden, he could do what he wanted, acted what he wanted and answer to nobody. John was special, this is all I'll say, unique in his own way, did things his way and got away with it. People who tried to emulate and basically fell down on their backside. And this particular head of service, one day, and he was sort of chair of what was commissioning body, and where you make the decisions about how you spend the money. And we also had probation and health in there as well, chief probation. And one day he tried to take £1 million out of my budget, and I manoeuvred things so that we said, no, you can't do that, that's unlawful. And he never forgave us for that, but what he did was, we needed adaptations on the current property we live in, and that was in 2007-8, before we could move there, because there was 5 of us living in a 2-bedroomed house, 2-bedroom cottage, which the landlord wouldn't do any repairs on. We subsequently won a court case against him after we left. and the local authority took him to tribunal and stuff over things that he didn't do. But this head of service decided, it was actually a bit of a nasty piece of work, because he decided to attack my family through the adaptations grant, along with my head of housing at the time, who wanted to control the implementation of the grant. And basically what happened was, we were left from 2008 to 2011, despite the fact that I'd won stage 3 appeals, I've got the reports, etc., which says they fudged the ombudsman, so I couldn't actually take them to the ombudsman in terms of what happened. And basically in 2011 I conceded certain things just to get us moved. I then had a 5-year battle about getting the adaptations redone, because the company they appointed them basically did a botch job, and that company sort of, I think, is starting to lose work with the new local authority from 2015. The reason I say new is after the chief exec and subsidies director and the head of housing and other executives were cleared out after Irene Lucas came in, and I've got a lot of faith in Irene, although it's sad that she's only going to be here for a short period before she hands the reins, but my understanding is she will hand the reins over to somebody that she's got confidence in. So the sort of candidates that we hear sort of out there on the internet, I personally don't think they'll get the job. And the good thing about Irene, I know her values, because also know her husband, because her husband opened his first shop not far from where I lived, and we booked our first ever holiday in, I think, 1980 through him, when he opened his shop. So, and you've watched what he's grown, and the brilliance of Sunderland is we're full of good leaders, we're full of business people who want to do best for the city, and if I'm going to name them, you're looking at the Paul Callahans of this world, you're looking at the John Hayes of this world. Yeah, there's others, the Darrell Franklins who were working on the pub scene in the early 90s, who did good things and brought people together. You're looking at all of the people who work around the culture bids. Now, I'm big on culture, and I'm big on sort of my kids being involved in that sort of stuff, and myself, because I've watched Hull grow, because we go to Hull quite a bit. And I watched the whole journey of where Hull started to where it got to, and the difference, and also Leeds. So bringing the tall ships, and I know people say it's a lot of money, what's it for, it's a big event. Reality is money makes money, and it grows confidence, and then businesses invest, and you see it grow as a sort of business model. Without that, just handing money out to your local communities is not going to grow the city. And I think, in fairness, Paul Watson saw that, invested a little bit too much faith in the chief exec. Let's say the cultures was unacceptable, and I think they hoodwinked the cabinet quite a bit from the period of 2008 up to 15. And one of those was about the lie that I uncovered about the missing accounts for this charity, and they've received nearly £5 million on the back of no accounts during that period, because it was from 2008 to 2013. And the only reason it got put right was in 2010 I got hooked up with a guy, or two guys, Jeremy Stevens and George Craig, who ran what was the Lazarus Trust. Lazarus Trust had already had a raw deal off John Fisher, the head of service. Oops, named it, but there you go, he's left now, so he's not an employee. And it basically, one day there was a scrutiny committee tour up to Duxford Park, and there was people who'd gone to George and said, he's £5,000, will you not open it? But George, being George and Jerry, says, yeah, we'll do that, we'll take the money. But they still opened it and invested the £5,000 actually in people, because their values, whilst if you read Mud Sticks, which is George's book about, his first book about his life, it does have a past, and one that he doesn't deny, one that he can't go back and rewrite because he doesn't want to. That was George then. The George I've met is a caring man around kids and vulnerable people, and won't let people be trampled on. And he'll stand up to the bullies. He'll stare them in the eye and go, okay then, take me on. And invariably the bullies back down, because George is a wily old character, and Jerry's quite similar. And in 2010 they pitch up at the Civic Centre saying, oh, we'll go and bust. Can you help us? So myself and another couple of commissioners sat in the room. One was someone who said they were my boss, but I was on a higher grade than them. But that's another story. And she did a runner, left me and this other guy from health to deal with George. And basically we got the money together to keep them going. But at the same time, because I'm doing all the commission, I saw the value of what they had on North Bridge Street, which was the latest project they'd opened. They were bringing in the sort of people the council couldn't reach. People off the streets, people hiding in the doss houses, and you know, the sort of people that if they're walking around the town, everybody else avoids them. Well, George and Jeremy put an arm around them and says, come and have something to eat, come and talk to us, tell us what your problems are, and we'll see if we can get someone to help. I walked in, saw what was going on, but realised that the Lazarus wasn't set up a way to receive the big money. I hooked them up with the Salvation Army. And basically we had a project which was going to revolutionise sort of homelessness, family access and things like that. And let's say my bosses interfered, went off and pulled the rug. At the same time then suspended me because they needed me out the way because I was starting to ask too many questions about the contracts and things and accounts. And I'd fought that for 2 years till 2013, as I said earlier. And they basically then said to George and Jeremy, oh, we've got rid of him, we'll work with you. But then afterwards they went and did the dirty on George and Jeremy. Things have come out since since then. So my fight is on two levels. One is about my kids and how one issue around the school, around my disabled child, but also how the then SJN department dealt with us and things up until sort of this last couple of years. Up until 2015, till the new Children's Trust came in, my family and my children got a bit of a raw deal. New Children's Trust came in, changed that. And I'm cool about that, but we'll deal with it. I'll deal with the past issues as well. And Irene and them and Paul Watson knew all about it. And all I can say is they've been very supportive in the right way and guiding me to say these are the things you need to do and it's up to you to do them. We can't do them for you because we can't investigate ourselves, which is an important factor sometimes when people criticise the local authority. Sometimes you've got to go through all the right channels to then open up the real investigation that you want. And sometimes you've got to cut corners by getting the press involved or running a campaign, or sometimes just go to the police because it is a police matter. 2013, or just before I got sort of left and I was suspended, I managed to convince the Lazarus Trust, who were getting a raw deal at this time, that there was some wrongdoing and showed them the evidence. We went through the first machination of the police thing, and it didn't quite work out. We now know why, because by 2012 the new Police and Crime Commissioner, who was very political and very linked into the city and the Labour group and to the, as it happened, to the charity who we had the concerns about. So you can see where things have been difficult for the police to follow through, and I don't criticise them for that, because if you look at it, we've lost 2 chief police constables since 2015. Both to 30-year service, but that's a bit of an oddity. And you've got to ask yourself why, and also we know the circumstances why they ended up in that, and we've got the evidence. So I'm quite happy to sit here and say to Vera Baird, if you want to challenge me, the challenge is there. I'll put my evidence down, you tell me why that's not true, and we'll let the courts decide, or we'll let your peers decide, or I'll tell you who would, I think most needs to hear this story about the Police and Crime Commissioner, and that's Syed Javid, the Home Secretary, because I think if he realised that, he would have a hit squad down into Northumbria Police and Crime Commissioner's office, actually realising that it's not fit for purpose because of the way that they operate, the way that they politically get involved in things, because you know the Police and Crime Commissioners are supposed to only be strategic, they're not supposed to get involved in day-to-day operations. Let's just say they've crossed that line a few times through friends, and I've had the police 2 and 3 times to my door. Other people have had the police there. Guys have been in court today through criticising MPs who are connected to this, and there's only 2 out of the 3. All I'll say is it's not the one in Washington, if that helps. So you can see the sort of problems that were coming. But also, during the period 2008 to 15, the local authority went to London in 2012 and basically sold to Parliament, this is our new financial development structure, bring all the money in. And fair credit to Paul Watson, he was literally going around the world and setting up deals, legitimate financial deals, to bring in money to build out Vaux, to build out different sites. The new IAMP, which is the deal between South Tyneside and Sunderland around Nissan and all of the supply chains, that is a European finance deal. It was part of it. And Paul was an absolute whiz at convincing people to invest in our city. We're talking about £1 billion worth of investment, but it might not feel it because of the state of the city centre, but the city centre wasn't always the local authorities to invest in. That's more about Network Rail, the companies that are there. The local authority can support that, but when you've got things like the bridges, because in reality our city centre is still the same shape it was in the 1960s and 70s, bar flattening the old train station, etc. So we need to think a little bit. The ARC was supposed to do that from 2002 onwards. All the ARC did was tidy up parts of Sunnyside, get rid of some of the, what they call the DOS houses around Camrex House and that, but as my former manager did, signed a contract to move everybody, forgot to put the clause in that thou shalt not, once you've taken £1 million off us to close, thou shalt not open up over the road, as he did. And so that happened. But we closed others successfully, where those of us who were sensible about contracts made sure those clauses were in. And we moved some very vulnerable people into far better supported accommodation. We revolutionised the older people stuff with Gen 2. People criticise Gen 2, but you've got to remember, like the council, there's many factions. I worked with I'll name them. I worked with Caroline Gitchen's team in the Art of Living. I was Peter Walls' wife, and I'd only ever met Peter, 3 times. Once was in 1999 when I was in the voluntary sector, the YMCA, and taken into his office in the Civic by Kevin O'Connor and Harry Truman, who was the housing portfolio, to say, why do you want to come? Why do you want to work with us? What can you do? And I sold Peter the dream. Stick me in the Shiny Row area. I'll turn your young person's flats around so that they don't, the failure rate and your turnover, because we win and you win. And it worked. And that gave us confidence with Gen 2 when they became Sunderland Housing Group. Obviously all the contracts came in, had to go and negotiate with them, had to also be blunt to say sometimes you got all these older people and you haven't got the structure set up to support them. And that's where Caroline came in about 2004-05. And I worked with her for 6 years. And we revolutionised the support networks for young people that they were supporting. The level of training, the level of standard of sort of education they were getting. For older people, it was combating all the loneliness. So if you see the tower blocks, when they refurbed them, we said put a community centre in the middle of it, so the 2 tower blocks can meet and things like that. And the thrive, and it was great at a time when the city was actually pulling together from about 2008 through to about 2010. Obviously, 2 things happened, which is how the chief exec hoodwinked the political establishment. 2008, we had the bankers' crash, where all of a sudden tighten your belts and all the rest of it. And then 2010, change of government and the austerity programme. Austerity was only supposed to last 2 years. We're now into year 8, so the second 4-year cycle of it, and we're about to go into the third 4-year cycle. Local authorities have had an astronomical amount of money taken out, but what the chief exec at the time did, and I know you've all picked up about these gagging orders. In reality, they're not gagging orders. They're actually what's called confidentiality agreements. However, Sunderland, I will say, has misused them beyond belief. I've signed one, but signed one in such a way and did things before that I can talk about certain things, but I can't talk about other things. And I can't publicly talk about particular people. But they also, with me, tried to put my daughter into my gagging order. So I told them to take that out, otherwise I signed nothing. But there's others that got them and got bigger payouts, and you hear the payouts that the chief exec and directors got when they got asked to leave. In fairness, there were a couple of payouts where people have criticised, where I'd actually say the people have been around so long that they were Sunderland through and through, and all it was that's what the system allowed. So when they got a £500,000 payout, whilst we might go, oh, I would actually say certain people actually not deserved it, but justified it because of the work they'd done in the city. over 30 odd years, 40 years. I know one person who started at the council at 18, left at 58, 40 years later, and did nothing but good for this city. So I can't criticise everybody for the way that they take the system and use the system. But what I can criticise them for is where they used and abused their powers. And that use and abuse of power started in 2008, and it's where we are now with how Siglian was set up. It's where we are now with the master plan around building houses. Because when Gen 2 took over the stock, two things happened. Suddenly the council were a strategic housing authority but with no houses to place anybody in, so you had to negotiate things. We sent our homeless service off to Gen 2, but then brought it back in-house and paid actually about £1 million more than what Gen 2 run the service for. And actually they did a worse job until we got it a little bit under my programme and jiggled the resources around to make it work. But also meant no houses were getting built in, because we know with the crash the problems Gen 2 had. And also the access to private landlords who charge a fortune. And we've got now people who take care leavers in and charge the local authority £200-300 a week. We know that happens, and that's wrong. But those are the sort of things that I think politically we've now got to work with the politicians, sort of, maybe the new group or maybe the group that comes after, because obviously the new group, you'll know from me Twitter feed, not what I would call sort of very ethical, but we'll go into that in a moment. And then you got all the developments like West Park, Seaburn, Pension. You've got the Greenbelt issues. You've got the planning issues around sort of how things have been presented. If I'll be honest, if I'm going to be critical of Siglian, your communication is pants. You don't know how to talk to people. You promise things that you then don't deliver, and you don't even do the basics like, for God's sake, we all know when nesting season is, so to not be able to chop trees down and knock the seaburn centre down because there's birds nesting on the day that you turn up is a little bit sort of weak in terms of that. But those are schoolboy errors, but that's what knocks people's confidence, and where we say, do we actually have confidence in these people? And it's not so much the board that sit around, because people criticise the board, but Siglian was a partnership between Carillion and the local authority, with Igloo as the development partner, which is how Siglian came about. Obviously Carillion this year went bust, no fault of the councils. I know people have criticised, saying, oh, could have seen these things. I haven't watched the parliamentary debate on Carillion this week. If anybody's to blame, Parliament are, because they were getting warning signs 4 or 5 years ago, and they should have been telling everybody, do not go into deals with Siglian. It's a bit like when the Icelandic banks went down. Parliament knew about it, but the local authorities were the last to know, because Parliament's not always the best communicator with local authorities through the LGA and various other bodies. So we have all these groups which have emerged, but the other key group, or guy who's, I mean, hat goes off to him, because at first you think, this guy is truly nutty, but actually, Len, you hit on stuff that people just needed to know about. You've sometimes put stuff out there that was irrelevant, you've sometimes taken your own thing off track, you've sometimes even broke the law. That's you. But at the same time, you've helped gather an army of people who care about this city. And they're watching your Facebook pages, and I know you've been kicked off for 24 hours, but we know why. Tweeting live from court is not a good idea during a trial. You could have gone to jail for it. It's called contempt of court, but they only knocked you off Facebook for 24 hours. So that tells you a story, the day that jail you. Because they would have been down years ago to jail you. I know there's another case that they're trying to sort of push, but I think they're wary of you, and rightly so. But also wary of the Lazarus, because the Lazarus with myself in 2013 went one route to the police at Southwick, got told there was no case to answer, it was a civil matter. We've now unravelled that one and convinced the new Chief Constable to let us to them that it is. We also went another route about the charity. But because Vera Baird's in office, it was very difficult to just have a police investigation, because Vera would have knocked it on the head and done various things. We know this, because that's been our behaviours, and our behaviours of warranting people like an MP to get people to come to your house to arrest you because you've put something on Facebook. Yet when it's alleged that they make things up and then make evidence up, there's no case to answer. I don't quite get that one, but you come to your own conclusion as the audience as to who's protecting who and where the blockages are and where we need to just get a bit of a drain pipe in and get rid of the blockage. And in terms of PCC, that's why Syed Javed. So write to Syed Javed and email him and say, come and investigate Vera Bed in our office. And you might, if enough of us do it, I've got a petition. It's on, it used to be on 38 degrees thing, but somebody intervened with 38 degrees because it's a Labour political site and said this petition is unlawful. They've closed it. Even though I've changed it, they won't let it open again. So I changed it to change.org. Yeah, it's only got 40 odd signatures, but it's there, it's been read. Just like my Twitter feed doesn't have loads of people retweeting. The numbers reading my Twitter feed yesterday whilst the council inauguration of what I call Dalek Miller, our new leader, was on. There's, let's say it was in the thousands for an hour. I was topping about 7,000 or 8,000 people reading it, which I never thought I'd be that popular on Twitter, but hey, popular guy. I don't think so, because not everybody agrees with me. So we are where we are, and we've got the stuff with Len. What I would say about Len's stuff is, after he received our stuff through an anonymous solicitor in Newcastle, who I now know who it is, because I know which member of the PCC team they were drinking with, because I narrowed it down and did a bit of investigation. So I know who sent the stuff to Len. I know where it came from and why, because I know how it got to London and then to this person, because myself and Jeremy sent it to journalists in London, one sent it back up to the northeast. Len contacted us and says, come to this. I told my friends and some political people, I'm going to talk to them, and they just said, well, also have a look at these other stuff. As a result of it, actually, the land deal to do with the property opposite his, I would say is pretty unlawful. The reason being is I won't go into too much detail because obviously they watch as well, but there's a documentation that emerged after the Wilton Chapman investigation, because they didn't it was sort of there, but it didn't get picked up as how important it was. So the Wilton Chapman report only tells part of the story, and it's a bit of a fudge because I was also the officer on the Centrepoint stuff that got interviewed, and if you read the third one around Centrepoint, it almost tries to make me out to be vindictive and the rest of it and stuff, but obviously I'm telling you my story today. But that wasn't what was actually said. It wasn't about the 75,000 they sold the land for. It was about the grant they got off the government to build the building, which they should have given to Gen2, but they gave to Centrepoint, who then owned the building and owned the service. And when the current leader in his portfolio holders with the then head of housing crashed the housing market last year, if you remember, a particular charity was very vociferous about domestic violence and the rest of it, but they were crashing it to get rid of her project. So they were both in on it. They were getting rid of her project because that's where the evidence about the original lie. And you can see I've got evidence all over the place. I've put 10 different places and said to them, if you take me out, it'll just come out willy-nilly en masse, and it'll take quite a lot of his hair, because I've also got stuff on councillors and their behaviours. A bit of insurance policy to ensure we do get justice, and therefore once we get justice we can then work with the new regime to put right the democracy. And that means addressing what's going to happen down Seaburn, addressing what the university are doing on the fields behind South Bends, because we can't just, it seems everything at the moment is willy-nilly and opportunist. We're not really thinking through what we're doing, whether it be up at West Park or whether it be Penshire. Excuse me. I just think we need a reset and a bit more strategic thinking, because there has been a lot of strategic thinking, and it seems as though the evidence we uncovered said there was too much deals going on or nods going on between planners and architects and this, and let's say they fudged matters, and council officers, if they write a report, they're told or write a statement about you. Normally a court or a judge takes that as fact. But what I've found, having worked with them, There are some very devious liars in the civic centre who will lie through their teeth to cover anything and make anything thing. Actually, there's a trick to take it onto a level. There's a trick I do. I ask them a question when I already know the answer and already got the evidence and wait for them to come back with a different answer, because what I then know is I've got them. And the Lazarus Trust have watched me do this since 2013. I've provided them with the questions, they've gone and got the answer, and I'm going, that ain't happening, because look, this is the email I've got, this is the evidence I've got, this is the timeline I've got, this is what the signatures I've got. And we've proved certain things shouldn't have happened, that did happen. And we're passionate about working through that process. And why this blog's come about is because of the political change. I think once Paul Watson sadly died, it was taken by the reins of two guys who I think were more democratic, and obviously you had the other guy was the cabinet secretary. I know some people have got issues with the cabinet or the former cabinet secretary, but all else is he came into Shiny Road just shortly after I'd started working there, and once I sat down with him, we actually clicked. Now, sometimes, to be honest, he knows sometimes he does things, social media, the rest of it, and that's the other thing for all local authority councillors, go and get some social media training. There was one yesterday engaged with us on Len Lowther's site about the allegation that she lives in a Gen 2 property whilst she owns the house. Well, actually it's not. She profits from the 3 houses because they're owned by either a family members or a partner, and they live in a Gen 2 house whilst profiting from private rent. Yet these are people who go under the auspice of Labour and Cooperative, and also the auspice of Momentum, this new sort of Jeremy Corbyn group. And I'm not anti any of them, I'm not having to go at them, the particular groups. I'm having to go at the people who hide behind the labels, like our current leader, who 3 years ago was a businessman, took 15 grand out of a local area committee that his wife chaired, didn't declare interest, spent the money probably appropriately on the thing that they said they were going to, but still got shares and dividends out of that transaction. Yet these are socialists. Oh, but if you're going to stand as a councillor on that banner, you can't be a hypocrite. You can't, otherwise basically I don't trust you and other people don't trust you. And there's plenty of them out there who unfortunately are harming the good councillors. And there are enough good councillors on there who can band together. At the moment, whilst we're not about taking the Labour Party out, what I would say is there's about 5 or 6 to should stand down. And I'm quite happy to, and 2 MPs, and I'll sort of name them who should stand down. Vera Baird, because of our control and politicisation of the police, and how our friends have benefited from that. And I'm quite upfront about that, and I'll debate on any stage with Vera Baird and give her the evidence and let the public and let the authorities decide that. 2 MPs, Bridget Phillipson, because prior to becoming an MP, she was involved in her mum's charity, and let's just say knew about all the wrongdoing and the things that shouldn't have gone on, housing asylum seekers using public money. You're not allowed. And they were 100% funded one of their projects, yet stupidly put it in the accounts which came out in 2000, that came out in 2013. So they've actually damned themselves. It's not as though we've done anything special or nicked any information. It was there in the public domain. Everything that we've brought as evidence has been in the public domain. You've also got Wayside Women in Need supporting Vera Baird in our campaign in 2012, very publicly. Google her in the Echo. 2012, Vera Baird went to all of the refuges. We also know that Vera Baird, just before the election, turned a bit Horton to Bridget's, what do you call it, constituency party do, over somewhere in Horton. And lo and behold, Claire then declares in the press that she's supporting this PCC, which was under a local authority contract where you were supposed to be non-political. However, what I'll say about Wayside Women in Need and Claire's motive is Claire was previously involved in the Labour Party, then got involved in GMB. Julie Elliott's in GMB. And the thing about GMB and the unions, they promote people through into different roles and just give you opportunities. They promoted Bridget, and all of a sudden she's the sponsor of GMB. Tried to go for for Washington, but Sharon Hodgson sort of basically beat her on the vote, which didn't go down well with Claire. Claire had to stand up there with Sharon about it, as if people have told me what is true. I think the term nearly came to blows is probably it. And then you've got that, and then later on 2000, we know Claire's got a temper because in 2010 she had the row in the Glass Centre with the Tory heckler of Gordon Brown. Hey, if somebody turns up and heckles me, I'll just ignore him. Won't drag you out, whatever, but Claire does what Claire does. Obviously, there's the financial issue and the missing accounts and what's behind that, which I think the police forensically do have to go into and look at the allegations, because these are serious allegations. We're talking potentially, if it is true, a local authority officer who lied, who then the profit came to a charity of nearly £5 million. I wish I could get £5 million just for being me, but I can't. You and I couldn't, but because of the Labour Party connections. And that's what I'm saying, there's part of the Labour Party that just needs to be reined in. And I sort of now know I've got a good map of who's who, because I've been around 20 years, so I know where it all came from and who was supporting who and things, and the Washington issues, and now Horton and around that area, and the confusion bit of who supports who, sometimes depending on what the issues are. So you've got two MPs, Julie Elliott. Now Julie's an odd case. 2010 I gave her my child's whole history of what happened in the school. She basically put it in the bin. She didn't deal with it, she didn't go anywhere with it. She says she had words with the people who in the authority, like the Director of Education. If she did, there were weak words. MPs are there to scream for us when things go horribly wrong, when the local authority lets us down, but she hid behind the party machine because there were party people involved, the GMB were involved, blah blah blah, because they were in the school, and you can see sort of where things closed. Then there were other issues. I had a dispute in 2015 with my neighbour, basically over a fence. The neighbour's fence blew down. I warned them, you need to get it fixed because it's dangerous, more out of courtesy, and they did a temporary repair, and then a few months later I'd had a word with the female who works for the JMB and was very good friends with Julie Elliott because she kept telling me this. Turns out in 2015 she actually signed a nomination form for Julie Elliott as a JMB officer. And at that point, just before she signed that, I'd emailed Julie Elliott to say, are you going to get involved in this? And I've got an email back saying, because it was that period when they're not an MP where they've got to resign from Parliament before they get elected again. So I emailed her on a private email and she said, if I get elected again, I can't get involved because it's two constituents and it's not my bag. Then shortly afterwards, the police sent us an email, or copied me into an email where Julie Elliott was on. And I'm thinking, hold on, why's my MP? And then I found the document where my next door neighbour had nominated her, showed that to the police, and Julie Elliott's never been involved since. But clearly she tried to be implicit and put pressure on the police, to implied pressure of, I'm the MP, do you know who I am? Well, yeah, Julie, we know who you are, but we know what you don't do as well. You actually probably, since Bill Etherington, you and him rank as the two worst MPs the city's had, so suck it up and just leave. And take your son with you, because your son's a missing councillor on my ward, and people are looking for him to ask him questions, because we actually don't know what he does. We know he worked in Parliament for a long time with you, but then got that, and we know that he then went to Labour North, whether he's still there if Fiona Stanton's decided he's too hot a potato and shipping him out somewhere. But like the Vera Baird story, took over from Mom after sadly Mom Morland died, went to Redcar, totally personally bollocksed up Redcar when she didn't support the steelworks, blamed all of our office workers and our campaign team, went to London, annoyed everybody down there, because I've got contacts who told us what she was up to. She came back in 2012 to be the PCC, and we've had her ever since. And she's got a little cabal of people, one of whom is a parent in my area, in my daughter's school, my youngest daughter's school, and who tried to join my Facebook this week. Until I did a bit of digging and found her actually on Vera Baird's staff list. So Northumberland Police need to be looking at what Vera's either instructing or what staff feel they've got to do for Vera. Because she is quite a powerful, quite intimidating person, but ask yourself, why is she not on my door? If Vera wants to come to my door and debate with me, then yeah, bring it on. Because me and Vera, I've known about Vera for years, because I used to be taught by our first husband, David Taylor Gooby. So you don't mixing the East Durham sort of Labour group without actually learning who's who. Because it was in the 90s, through the early 2000s, with Tony Blair and all of those, and Armstrong and the rest of it, it was actually a very powerful base for Labour. Still is to some degree. And I think what's happened as a result of all these issues, they all sort of got mushed in the washing machine. But then the change in politics, because just before the elections, I emailed the whole Labour group, a very polite email, just to say, be considerate of what Paul brought into the city in terms of resources, IAMP and the rest of it, the joint ventures. And you need to cover this in, because I'd seen a previous email from January. Bear in mind, Paul died in the November, or was buried in the November. Early January, Graham Miller sent the whole group, bear in mind he was Paul's cabinet person for portfolio holder for adult services. He sent an email around the whole group. Basically, he might as well have slagged all the work off Paul, but while he was in cabinet, he kept shut. And that's sort of deceit as I can't stand, because I just think that's actually quite deceitful. Where you sit there and you do all the work, you smile politely, and then after they're gone, you tell them, didn't like what you were doing. Sorry, but not my sort of person. Obviously, he's become leader, but what he's also done is he's done a votes for jobs thing. I predicted 5 minutes before last night, I put on the internet the full cabinet. I'm 100% right. 5 minutes before, he presented it to the whole of the thing for the votes. Some Labour people didn't turn up last night, maybe in protest, because they're not allowed to vote against once it goes to full cabinet. I don't understand that, and I explain that to people like Len, who were, because the original Saturday when they voted was 32-29, but stupidly, if they'd done it the other way around and put Harry Truman as leader and John Kelly as his deputy, I couldn't have done what I've done, because I wouldn't have attacked Harry, not as leader. But by putting Miller up there, I was here for attack. So I was able to get him. And we're doing it on an evidence base. It's political and it's evidence based, because what we're saying is these people are not fit to run our city, because what they want to do is collapse all the big projects, because they've said that almost in the email, and then in other circles that we're hearing, and then put all the money out to the area committees where he's appointed the chairs. We're hearing things like Denny Wilson, you'll get your pontoon at South Hilton and North Hilton, you can have your boat between the two pubs. Why we're doing that when we've just built a £100 million bridge? Do you want to explain that one to me? No, what we actually need is bigger projects. We need the culture being supporting the tall ships, and that's the sort of thing we need more of, whilst also addressing, because the other side is they're actually crap at sometimes of organising services. I'll give you an example. Car parking. I've got about 2 minutes left, so I'll just quickly do this. Yeah, and you renew your car park pass for these new zones they're putting in, cost them a fortune in administration. Why? They know council tax whether you've left or not. They know through the DVLA that they can get access to whether your car's still registered to you. So why don't they just give you a 2 or 3 year pass and you renew it every 3 or 5 years? Cut down on the administration, therefore your corona savings, so you can shift that money into frontline services. So if it's bins and kids and the rest of it, that's important. Cut the administration and shift that money. But they don't want to do that because certain administrators in there are protecting their own cabals and their own interests. And that's what's wrong with the council at this point in time. Irene's doing her best. She cleared out the dead wood at executive level and some of the worst practices. But there's only so much Irene can do. Paul will start to do the same once we alerted him to all of the things that the previous chief exec was up to. And we know that there's issues about the 2 chief execs before this one, because the one before that is now up on a perjury charge in the authority he moved to before he went to Liverpool, which was Lancashire, and Dave Smith has been told by me, because I tweeted him in 2014, that we will expose him. So that is what it's about. It's about bringing people together. So watch our Twitter feed. I will start doing more blogs like this and talking to you. If people want to get in touch with me, Twitter or message or know me personally, I'll talk to you more, and I will try and incorporate and get your stories into something that makes sense within the city. Is that okay? Okay, thank you.